Our next panel is a really exciting one, leveraging the power of NFTs. So they're going to give a bit of insight into the different use cases of NFTs, how to establish mainstream adoption, what are some of the barriers people have entering the space, some really exciting projects. So yeah, let's give it up. Woo!
Yeah, let's dance.
So, having some problems with my microphone, but yeah. Welcome. We've got a great panel today on the subject of how to leverage the power of NFTs. My name's Thomas McCauley. I'm a journalist at The Next Web. And on my panel, I have from my left, Hunter Weiser-Williams, CEO of Unchained Partners. I've got Jonathan Pullinger, Token Marketing Manager at Outlier Ventures. Yuri Z, founder of Sway Social, and Richard Rouser, Head of Innovation at Token Tracks. So this is a topic that's become very prominent in recent months, but still, I think, largely misunderstood by the public, and it's about these sort of use cases of NFTs. In my experience, the general public normally associates NFTs with digital artworks, often being sold for eye-watering prices, but what are some of the real-life use cases that they're not aware of that you think are really powerful?
Hunter, do you want to go first?
Sure, I can definitely start. There's a lot of use cases that we're seeing that have been theorized for a long time that we're now seeing to really garner some serious adoption. For the longest time, we've always thought of NFTs primarily as this proof of ownership, this proof of authenticity, this proof of originality, and as we continue to move forward, we see these eye-watering prices, these pictures of a cat selling for $1 million, and we always said, well, that's goofy. But I've always viewed it as an almost necessary evil, if you will, because it creates these headlines, it creates these articles where people come in and they say, that's unbelievable, what is an NFT? And then they look into like the real use cases around it, which we're seeing pop up more and more, which is you're seeing NFTs now in insurance claims, in house deeds, in car titles, really moving towards that space of what I believe the long-term use of NFTs will be. But yeah.
Oh, cool. I also see a lot the charity space starting to adopt NFTs, social change for good, so to speak. And I mean, I've seen a couple of projects recently, one working with grassroots football. So they've gone to footballers and ex-footballers and asked them to design one-of-one NFTs. And these NFTs are then sold to go into a DAO. And that money is then used to facilitate sport for children from poorer backgrounds. And I mean, I think that's where we're starting to see the NFT, like you say, selling for eye-watering prices. But if the money's actually then going back into a community and actually being used to actually help less advantaged people and actually grow their skill set, whatever that may be, I think that actually offers a really sort of useful case for an NFT, to say the least. But I've also seen other projects look at sort of staking with them, and I think that's probably more you, Yuri.
Yeah. So my take is I think like we haven't seen the real utility of NFTs just yet. And I was fortunate enough to be in this NFT space, particularly back in 2018, when with the previous company, we kind of tried to think in the future what all these different use cases will be. Starting with college degrees, which is, I think, still a very valid concept. And the way I look at the industry right now is, if you look at how internet looked back in 1996, like there was this feeling of, okay, there is some value there. This is going to go somewhere. It's going to provide some value because of its core concept. But nobody really knew, what to do with it. Now we know, like, it's e-commerce, it's social media, it's all these different things that it powers. And I think we're at the exact same place right now.
Yeah, I would agree. We're all familiar with NFTs as a way of uncoupling creatives from intermediaries, whether that be a publishing house or a recording studio, a film studio, what have you. But they also allow ways for creatives to interact with their fans in ways that they haven't before, and that's what I find super interesting. So in the context of, say, a musician, of course, you could sell your music as in the form of a one-of-one or an edition, but you can also build cool utility into the NFTs that you're selling. We're launching a product at Token Tracks with Rockboy in a couple weeks' time, and what we're doing is selling NFTs on his behalf that allow you to join a clan with a theme song. And then we're building on-chain gaming mechanics so that you can battle it out as a member of the clan. So stuff like that, where you're really actually making it more than just the art and allowing the fans to interact with each other as well as the musician. This adds a lot of value.
Brilliant. And what do you think are some of the sort of barriers towards those kind of use cases becoming more mainstream?
If I may, I know the guys from Token Tracks really well. I think what's the misconception in the industry today is, like, you look at how things are being done in Web 2, if you will, or how they've been done the last 20 years, and people think of MP3s as this music format, and that's going to be an NFT. Well, I think the value is around that, so that's where NFTs come in. It's not just the ownership, but what's all the different things that you can attach to it, and that kind of thing, I think, will build the next generation of NFTs. So you're still going to listen to music the same way you do, so that's good news probably. But there's all these different use cases that are going to be built around it, including communities, which I think are the most powerful one.
I would agree with that. I would say that, like for example, Spotify. You're not necessarily going to replace Spotify with a Web 3.0 version. But what you will see is, you'll see, like you say, with the fans actually having a way of actually buying in. And one of the really interesting things, as we were talking about the other day, was to a Gen Z person, a digital picture of a T-shirt and a physical T-shirt as a piece of ownership is considered exactly the same. And that's as someone that's slightly older, slightly struggled to get my head around that thought process. But if I can't wear it, how is it still a T-shirt? It's like, well, when you understand that that's how they're seeing the world and that's how they're valuing it, it makes a lot more sense that actually you can see how this way of interacting through digital merchandising will actually work really well with artists.
Yeah, if I may add to that, what we did come up with the other day was, like, to our parents, it really mattered, their persona on the outside. To our generation, it's how we look on Instagram. And to the newer generations, it's not even them anymore, it's their avatars, it's their PFPs. Yeah. That's what kind of gives them the social value in the communities. Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Hunter.
No, I was just saying, I've always thought, speaking to the barriers of entry, I've always thought that one of the most significant ones really comes down to compliance and regulation. I think we were just briefly touching on that earlier. But as of right now, I think we're waiting on a lot of the biggest governments in the world to really tell us what is allowed, what can we actually move forward with, and what is some set regulation for how to create these ecosystems. Because a lot of us are creating these ecosystems and just assuming that we're doing it by regulation because there aren't these clear guidelines. And once we get those clear guidelines, then I believe you have the power for the technology to catch up to the seamlessness sort of interaction that we're all hoping for, because that barrier to entry is really about, I want my grandmother to be able to go onto your platform and not have to go through this tremendously complex on-ramping process. And to me, that begins with compliance and regulation, which hopefully we'll see some clear pictures from these governments in the coming years, but fingers crossed.
I would agree with you there. I think the key barrier entry really has to be user experience right now. And what we're seeing in the music space for NFTs anyway is that Ethereum is not so great for music NFTs, because whereas for visual arts, it's quite common to have one-of-ones that you want to achieve a high price for. Most musicians, they want an edition. They want to release 5,000 copies of something, or 10,000 or 20 or 30. So you need a blockchain where you can have high volume and then low cost. And of course, transaction fees, gas feed into that. So Polygon is our go-to. A lot of people that are publishing music on blockchain are using Polygon for it. But we have to handhold a lot of our users onto the Polygon network, and it's very difficult. If they're transacting in Matic, oh gosh, I just bought it on the Ethereum network instead of Polygon by accident, and then you've got to bridge it over, and there's a lot of complications. And these UX problems are solvable, but the solutions are not commonplace yet.
But I think that hits the nail on the head, really, isn't it? And I completely agree with what you're saying. Is the fact that you've got this situation where you've bought it on the wrong chain, you have to bridge it, you have to do all these bits and pieces. And that's, I think, the biggest challenge, is that if that was a Web 2 experience and it was really difficult as a Web 2 customer to use something like Spotify, we just stop, right? We just go, okay, well, we'll use Apple Music, or we'll go back to something else. Whereas on Web3, we're still in this piece where people are being very kind to us at the moment and allowing us to sort of have these sorts of these conversations, and they're still happily to that because we're in this very early stage of adoption. But like you say, as things start to move across, we really got to simplify this user program. We need to get down to the thing of, okay, I want to listen to a song by Jamiroquai. I press the button, I get the song by Jamiroquai. I want to buy the NFT of Jamiroquai. Next to the track, I press the button, I get the NFT. Right? We don't need to go through this multi-step process in the same way as that you don't when, the only thing you have to do with buying a physical thing is to put your credit card in. We need to kind of get to almost what that looks like.
Totally.
And, we've got projects over at Outlier Ventures that are working on a similar thing, sort of on and off fiat ramps and a rewards program around of this side of things. One of the projects is CoinFX, which is actually going down that road. But in touching on what you said about the regulation, I completely agree. And I remember when we were doing ICOs back in 2017, and it was like the Wild West. And, we were all in this bubble. It was like, well, look, are we legal? Are we doing things correctly? And we didn't have a clue. We were literally making it up as we went along because there was nothing as a way of guidance. And I think we got away with that bit at that point because the industry was so new and so young. Whereas I feel that with the NFT space, now that we've actually seen people that have run ICOs that have been, shall we say, slightly dubious ICOs, and people have actually gone to jail, we've actually now got to this stage where we're actually being a lot more cautious, and quite rightly so, because there's huge amounts of money involved with people and how things are working, that we need to actually bring this regulation in place. And we desperately need the UK, Singapore, and the US to actually agree on a framework. Right. If they could agree on a framework, we would all have a much easier life, I'm sure. What do you think, Hunter?
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that'll also set the tone for one of the other major barriers to entry and barriers to adoption that we're seeing right now, which is mobile integration, especially when you look at the iOS platform and them just, everyone we talk to, it's can we get on iOS? Can we not get on iOS? Nobody knows. Do we need to go through this unbelievably complex process of using third-party wallet holders? If you look like Upland and what they've done, it's tremendously complex. But I think exactly once a lot of these governments come together, give us some guidelines for what we should be doing, at least moving forward. I believe iOS falls in line. I believe mobile integration falls in line thereafter, and we're going to start seeing a lot more seamless interaction with these products.
Touching on the iOS thing, I feel that if Apple release an NFT marketplace, then all of a sudden all of our problems will go away because Apple will just make it so. I mean, we'll have new challenges, and obviously for
Don't want a big fat cut.
Yeah, exactly.
Take 30
Yeah. It's going to sting in the pocket, to say the least.
Yeah.
And also probably the technological advancement will slow down. But I mean, I do think we perhaps need to see something like that, and then start actually moving those, especially with iOS, because it's a minefield for any app, let alone a crypto app, to say the least. As soon as you're taking a payment system.
But like Richard said on trying to get the UX to be better, you have to look at what we're competing against. Like most of the apps we're using today, they literally are programmed to grab your attention in the 3 seconds they have.
Yes.
And the onboarding has, if you compare the apps that are like made 10 years ago and today, it's just insane how optimized these onboarding experiences are.
Absolutely.
And like in crypto, most of the experience are still revolving around wallets, trying to get the private keys, selecting the chain. I mean, like, I've had a similar experience with Polygon. We've had a similar experience with our project with Polygon. People wanted to buy NFTs. They were just like, yeah, but the bridge, I mean, if I want to bridge some Ethereum over, that would cost me like $120. And the NFT is $50. So, no sense in that, right? No. So I think UX will kind of bring this whole, and also I think, Web 2.5 makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
That's what's been talked about recently a lot. I think we have to kind of go through this UX window, and then slowly the technology adoption will come. The full Web3 experience, if you will.
And could you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by Web 2.5?
So Web 2.5, I mean, it's different things to different people. To me, it's trying to capture the user experience that majority of the people are used to, and at the same time provide some decentralization. You can't go fully Web3, fully decentralized. But a good example for that is, and our project uses Taurus, Tor.us, which is basically a wallet with an interface that allows you to log in using Google or Facebook or any of these credentials that you already have. So I think these kind of solutions are crucial because it's much easier to use that than it is to go, set up a MetaMask and then store your private key and write down the seed words. I mean, like, my mom's not going to do that.
Sure. And in terms of the regulation, do you have any sort of ideas on how that could sort of support innovation while also kind of protecting the users or and the companies themselves? What sort of rules could help that kind of to flourish?
It's a really good question. I think most important is a framework. I think there will be some laws enacted that that will at least allow us to have a clear idea, and then judging on history, I'm sure it will be, forgive my French, but bastardized very quickly. Sort of around the introduction of futures back in the day to make sure that farmers are planting crops, and now you have GameStop worth hundreds of dollars in terms of just what that looks like. But I think once exactly like you were saying, with these countries coming together and laying out that regulation, once they really have that, I think more than anything is just a framework, and for exactly what you do with accelerators, which is you can create a almost plug and play solution of saying, we know that we're in compliance, we know that we're by regulation. It's not the 2017 ICO season where everyone's saying, are we going to go to jail? We're not sure. And I think that more than anything will allow the adoption of a lot of these Web 2 companies that we've been talking about, and allow them to step into the space more securely and more confidently, which is going to bring a lot of interoperability, which we were talking about earlier. I think that's potentially what that looks like.
Sure. And in terms of the sort of risks and drawbacks of NFTs, are there any areas that you feel people need to sort of proceed with a bit more caution?
I think for me, the biggest question is, how decentralized do you want to actually be? It's great to say, I want to be fully decentralized and I want to be in charge of my seed words and I want this and I want that. And that's absolutely fine when your NFTs are worth $2, right? And if you lost your wallet today, you've probably lost $50, which would annoy me, but anyway, we move on. But the key thing is that what do you do when you're, for example, if you're holding Bored Apes and they're now worth $200,000 to $300,000 or $1 million plus, and depending on the rarity, do you still want to be responsible for those words, or do you want to be able to make a call to your custodial service and say, look, I'm really sorry, but I've got drunk last night and accidentally eaten my keywords. Can you please help me out? Or I've locked myself out of my account. That kind of thing. And I think there will be some people that want to stay completely degen and absolutely want to stay and look after their own words and do it themselves. But I think the vast majority of us, in the same way as we don't take our wages out of our bank accounts when we get paid in fiat and stuff it into our mattress at home, we leave it in the bank. I think we're going to need a sort of a custodial service that's effectively like a banking service. And that's where I see most of the regulatory bits coming in, because that's the piece that I can see mixing that with the de-risking the NFT space.
Yeah. I would agree with you there. I think most people are not equipped to be their own bank, be fully financially sovereign. Because the thing is, if you are completely fully financially sovereign, then if you're your own bank, you have to deal with the thieves yourself. And that's not something most people want to have to do. Any of us that have been hacked in the crypto space could tell you that. Yeah. But I think regulation is clearly coming. It's clearly something that's needed, as recent days have shown. And we do have an existing example of what that might look like in public equity markets, of course, where the kinds of activities that you see in NFT markets have been illegal for years. Stuff like insider trading, wash trading, and so on. And I think we'll see some of those bits and pieces adapted for crypto.
We were also talking a little bit the other day about the sort of benefits of a council model in.
Yes, absolutely, inside a DAO. I mean, because this is one of the challenges, is that we're seeing a lot of NFTs, especially when they're doing for social change for good, they're actually putting their money into a DAO. And obviously it's great to have a fully decentralized organization, an autonomous organization, until you involve the public. Because this is the biggest challenge that I've seen, is like we had a competition in the United Kingdom to name a lifeboat. And the best that the British public could come up with was McBoaty McBoatface. Which is great, right? And absolutely. And when we're naming a lifeboat, and we've raised money to pay for a lifeboat, and it's going out to save lives, if it's called McBoaty McBoatface, it's almost a little bit funny. However, if it was to rename your company, or if it was to rename your product, or it was to design a new football kit, and somebody decided that it would be really, really funny to have a children's football kit that's got a phallic symbol on it, which after a few beers, somebody is going to suggest. That you do need almost like a ruling council that works, that can be elected by the DAO, and there's sort of like maybe 7 of them, and they get to actually they can't actually change things, they can just stop changes from happening. And they can just refer back, more like, similar to where the House of Lords works with the House of Commons in the United Kingdom. So the House of Commons goes to pass a law, it goes up to goes up in a Senate to the House of Lords, and they go, no, we can't say that everybody has to wear a top hat on a Tuesday. No, that's got to be stopped. And I think you do need that last sort of sense check. But I do believe that the council should be fully elected by the DAO.
Sure. That's kind of almost the same discussion as with, do you want to have full decentralization?
Absolutely.
Or slightly less than full? And
Yeah.
with the DAOs, it's the same. Do you want to have full governance or slightly less than full? And that's where I think the value comes in. That's where I think a lot of companies are going to cash in on the next couple of years, because they understand that just having full control over something is just chaos at the end of the day. Because it's fun, like let's short a stock or let's pump GameStop. And somebody thinks it's fun, and then all of a sudden you have 100,000 traders on Robinhood going buy, 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 buy. And it's chaos. It can be chaos. And Bitcoin maxes are going, what? What are you saying now? Sorry about that.
That fine line between centralized and decentralized, or where that line should be, is really interesting, because we've been trying to build DAOs for years, and the ones that we've seen have the most success have these established committees and subcommittees and leaders of those subcommittees, which arguably is some aspect of centralization, just like you're saying.
Yeah.
And,
not black and white.
We may, in the coming weeks, see actually a backtrack of people saying no, more decentralized, because with, and sorry if this is too soon, but with the recent happenings in the Terra ecosystem, a lot of people are saying it was so decentralized, and then they allowed a little bit of centralization, and something went unbelievably wrong. And so we may see a backtrack in the coming weeks around that. But yeah, I do agree that some level of centralization, especially around custodial wallets as well,
Absolutely.
like saying it I think is going to be paramount in the coming years for that seamless interaction with the space.
Sure. And can you think of any good examples of DAOs that have used that sort of blended model of decentralized and centralized?
I really love what MakerDAO is doing. I really do love what MakerDAO is doing, and I think that they have a really interesting model. And Olympus DAO has some very, very forward-thinking thoughts, in my opinion. But I don't know if you have any others.
I like the model that's been done with FOAP. I think they've done a really good job. We're looking around at some of our own internal projects at OV. We're seeing a sports DAO that's come through, sports DAO and game DAO that are coming through, that are actually putting together these communities and committees inside, so that you have people that are genuinely interested in the sports and the individual games inside, and then they all come together to vote for what makes for the better for the industry in general. And that's what I really like to see. So it's almost like you've taken the silo of, say, rugby and football, or UFC and NHL, and you've then started to bring the silos together to actually sort of bring together a governance for how we're going to handle the merchandising. Because that's the biggest thing that I see as one of the biggest challenges, is the fact that we need to kind of almost have the silos, but we need to bring them together for the overarching piece. And there are a couple of the ones I think have done it very, very well.
Sure.
What we're doing is funnily enough, also has a lot to do with DAOs. Sway Social is basically building the Web3 infrastructure for social networks. And what we believe is that every single creator will have to have a community that will be his DAO to some extent. He's still going to be the counsel to himself, trying to set the rules and at what terms people come in, what's happening with them. But the main idea is that if you look at what's happening right now in social media, is whenever you give a like or a comment to somebody, you are giving him some value. And at this point in time, Instagram's in between that and monetizing that value through ads. Now, what we see as a future, as a potential future, is you will have this value being captured by the DAO itself. So like a self-sustaining ecosystem, and we call them sub-DAOs because, like you said, there's these multiple structures and layers, which I think can work and will be, I think, really exciting in the future.
Yeah, so I guess the big issue with DAOs is that a lot of people don't realize they're enfranchised. Many people might buy a governance token for a DeFi protocol or something. They don't know that that confers the right to vote on things. And you have the same issue with equities, don't you? A lot of people don't know that as shareholders they have certain rights, perhaps even obligations, you might say. But if you look at how much of DAO participants are actually active, there's not many in many cases. Yeah, so.
In terms of, one barrier that sort of stands out to me is the technical understanding of NFTs isn't that high among the mainstream users. And do you think there are ways to overcome that, or is it even necessary? I wonder, Richard, maybe particularly in your industry, working with musicians, does their understanding of NFTs high? Is it important for them to know how it works?
So this is an issue for us. Yeah, a lot of musicians, they tend to fall into two camps. There's some that really get NFTs. They understand how it's going to be a game changer. They understand how it liberates their creative works from the arbiters, the middlemen that be, whether that be a record label or a streaming service, what have you. Of course, most musicians, they only see 12 to 18% of the revenue from every stream, and they can turn to a blockchain-based kind of service marketplace for NFTs and earn 90% or more of the revenue from selling the art. They get things like that, but a lot of them don't understand the technical underpinnings. Some people only have a vague idea of what an NFT is, and so we do have to spend a lot of time educating musicians and onboarding them, getting them familiar with how they might want to talk about it with their fans, because not only can it be difficult for the musician, but also many of them have an existing fan base, and they might not necessarily know how to get involved with NFTs, and so the musician is often the best cheerleader for that.
Absolutely, and that's one of the ones that I find really interesting is that you've got to, it's not just the musician that you've got to bring across, it's also the fan base of the musician. And that's I think, the bigger challenge. Because being able to sit down and explain to somebody one-to-one and get them to understand how this could actually benefit them is quite straightforward. But when you've got to do that to an audience of, say, 10,000, 100,000, a million people, especially with some of these audiences, especially with some of the older artists with an older audience,
Absolutely.
That's where it becomes more complicated. I look at it this way: if I've heard of the musician, the chances are porting those fans is going to be a bit more complicated. If it's one that I haven't heard of, the chances are it's a lot easier because their fan base is a lot younger.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe an interesting observation we did for one of our projects, Cloud Art. We talked close to 100 influencers. So Cloud Art, what it does, it basically takes an Instagram photo, an Instagram post with all the data, and then turns it into an NFT. And we were reaching out to these influencers. And the funny thing is, everybody knew about NFTs. Some of them had these great ideas of 100,000, or I want $500,000 for that post, which is insane. But the problem was that they didn't majority of them didn't know what's the value in them. So how do you value these NFTs? And it was so hard to wrap their heads around that in most cases they'd rather say, you know what, let's wait a bit longer for us to do something together. So that was an interesting observation. So we then changed the model. We said, what we need to do is basically end-to-end, just like Richard said. It starts with educating these creators first, and then also empowering them so that they can educate their community.
Agreed.
And then try to get over that barrier. But I think with the majority, it's still an issue, where does the NFT value come from? That's so hard to understand sometimes.
And I think that this may be a relatively controversial opinion, but in my mind, if there is this really high need for education, and if there's this really high need for on-ramping and showing people the value of what we're doing it wrong. And in a perfect world, I have a credit card in my wallet that I can swipe, and then I now own this package of Skittles. And I have no idea what happened. I don't have the slightest clue of where that mag strip or chip card talked to what bank, was talked to this bank, was talked to my bank back in the US. I don't know what's happening, but I know that I had the Skittles, and I can now eat them. And in a perfect world, that should be theoretically where we're heading. But I think that I think everyone that we've been talking to, and everyone here is actively striving towards that model and that goal of not needing the education. It is important now, and I think just like you said earlier, we're getting a little bit of forgiveness from our current community because they know it's still so early. But I think that in a perfect world, that education shouldn't necessarily be such a major sticking point.
Yeah, we need to abstract away all this plumbing, and the holy grail for NFTs really is smooth UX, and I think we'll get there. Yeah.
And I always like to think is that actually with the NFTs themselves, are we going to actually start to almost get a little bit more centralized around the NFTs itself? Effectively, are we going to start to curate the collections directly for them? So we'll effectively have a team in the same way as like a music label does or a film studio. They'll actually go out and they'll curate collections that, in the same way as, you log on to Spotify and you say, you like so-and-so, so you'll like that. Well, are we going to see that starting to become more and more prevalent inside the NFT space? Because let's be honest, if you go onto OpenSea, you really need to know what you were looking for before you got there. The sale was made on Twitter.
Very true.
And we've got a project called Art at OV that's trying to do that within the actual art space, as the name suggests. And they're actually working with the artists and putting together curated collections. So if you were to buy X, then you may like Y, and because you know Hunter, well, and you've both bought A and B in the past, then perhaps you'd both like to buy C. And I can see that becoming a much more interesting way of dealing with NFTs.
Sure. Yeah, so good.
I look at it, and we've discussed actually this yesterday, so I'm glad you brought it up. I look at it like a 3-layered process. One is, where is the NFT being created? Now, in most cases, that's not even an issue. Like, people don't look at that. They just go and mint on OpenSea, which is not that good. Like, Foundation DAO is one of the projects that allow you to own your own smart contract and own your own keys for the NFTs you issue. Then there's the channel, and then the last one is actually the selling point, or the point of sale. Now, the channel, I think, right now is just Twitter.
Yes.
And nobody's solving that. And I think that's where projects like Token Tracks come in, because they are actually the curators. And music, that's pretty fairly well known. Like, you know, just doing some music doesn't get you anywhere. You need the DJs, you need the radio hosts, you need the podcasts, you need to get this out there. And again, we come back to the discussion around the decentralization and how much we want that. And this whole creator space is right now talking about direct-to-consumer, D2C model, where, you know, I have 100 fans, and so what? Now I'm going to send my 100 fans the new song, and what's going to happen afterwards? Like, we still need to work on that. And I think, like, this second layer of distribution is going to play a really important role, and curation, of course. And like you said, like, OpenSea just helps you check out. I mean, I don't know anybody who's ever come to OpenSea and go like, you know, that's a good NFT, I'm going to buy it.
No, like I say, I see OpenSea like a supermarket. You just go in there. You already got your list.
Yeah.
You go in, you collect what you want, and you go. And that's it. And that's fine at this moment in time. But I do think we need to start working out how we fix the Twitter sales channel, or do we even need to fix the Twitter sales channel?
I think also we need to consider that you know, NFTs are not just visual arts, and most marketplaces for NFTs right now are gearing the browsing experience towards visual arts NFTs,
Yes.
and that's not great for music. You know, it's not great for perhaps, you know, ebooks, or for, I don't know, cooking recipes, or maybe an app store on blockchain. You know, there's other marketplaces that do try to address these things, but none have got them quite right. So I think that's going to be a big change that we see.
So how would you start to address that, especially if we look at music? How would you look to address that?
So with music, it's tricky, because if you think about it, visual arts NFTs, you can kind of browse multiple ones at the same time on your screen, but you can't listen to more than one NFT at the same time,
exactly.
right? So really what it's about in that case is trying to bring a player to life that's easily accessible, that makes it easy to kind of browse and scrub through each of the NFTs you might be interested in listening to. But yeah, there's a challenge there, but that's one that we're addressing with the Token Tracks marketplace.
Yeah, I saw another project called Vibes, and what they were looking to do is to basically look at the rhythmic output from the music that you've listened to, and then match it through AI to sort of 4 or 5 other new tracks, and then display to show those as something that you may like.
Yeah, you know, like artists like Def Beef, you know, who's primarily an audio artist. You know, when he first started selling his work, he would intentionally create a visual side of it, just so the browsing experience is better on OpenSea and the other marketplaces, and kind of a similar thing. Yeah.
And I think at the moment that's the sad truth of it. Is that you've actually got to make, if you are a musician, you've actually now got to become a video artist.
Yeah.
That's the sad truth of it at the moment. But this will change.
That will change, yeah.
And oftentimes you see if you're an artist, a lot of times people are expecting this tremendous amount of utility and community, where we're actually now seeing a lot of traditional artists trying to get into NFTs, and people are saying, well, where's the utility? Where's the private, you know, discords? And saying, oh, I just came here to do art. You know, I'm not trying to do a 10,000 piece generative to start a community. I'm just here to do art. So we're almost seeing the same from the other side as well, around different people's expectations.
But I've also go on. Sorry, I was going to say I've always seen though with the traditional art though that when they have tried to move across, they really struggle to get their heads around the process in general, and the level of education that they require and their fan base requires is obviously very high normally. But taking away from that, the biggest challenge that I see when they're trying to actually put together this digital art collection is that they don't really understand exactly what they're doing as such. So they put together a one-of-one, and they think, okay, so I put together this one-of-one. And because I put this together a one-of-one, and if this was a print, I'd sell this print for £10,000. My NFT is now worth 3 ETH. Well, 4 ETH, maybe 5 ETH by the time this panel ends. The way we're going today, it might be 20 ETH. But, but the point that I'm making is that they don't seem to have this understanding that they've almost got to, as you bring them in, you've actually got to actually sort of reprice your art based upon comparables inside the NFT space. They're still pricing it against the artist gallery price of what they would do if you were in Shoreditch.
Sure. No, I just wanted to say, when we were talking about musicians and are they kind of like visual artists as well? And I think it depends on which part of the music industry you look at, because I know, like, being a die-hard metal fan back in the early days, it mattered a lot what the cover looked like, and that was kind of like a cult thing as well. So there is I think, some intersection there when it comes to visual art. It still looks good, and I mean, like, I remember when iPhone came out, and when Steve browsed those album covers, to me that was like, this is so awesome. I want to have this. So we are still visual beings, right? So, and what might happen in the future is we would have these experiences, which will still be musical experience, just with some form of visual element that we might not have had right now. And I mean, we'll see, because most of our music gets listened on our phone anyway.
Absolutely. I really hope we do, because I don't think you, but I really miss the vinyl record and that cover, when you got that vinyl record and you looked at the artwork on it, and like you said, especially within heavy metal, especially in the days of the sort of Def Leppard and
Iron Maiden.
They were, they really put a huge amount of detail into those album covers, and they were genuine. You would put them on your wall because they were amazing. And it would be lovely to go back to that stage where we actually start to see an improvement in the, because everyone's got a little bit lazy. They put a photograph up now because it's only going to be seen as less than a square inch on your mobile phone.
True. And an interesting thing about that is that oftentimes the visual artist that was involved in the liner notes of the album cover, they were just paid a one-off fee, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then if the album exploded in popularity, well, there's no further benefit to the visual artist. NFTs kind of changed that, because what we often do at Token Tracks is we pair up kind of visual artists with musicians, and they both get a cut, of course, and so it's better for the visual artist. They're more enfranchised, and they want to see the musicians succeed as much as anybody. So
absolutely, and I think that's one of the things you've hit on the nail on the head. Is that one of the things it has done is it has helped with people coming into the space, the continual royalty. So if you are involved in a project that becomes a multi-million-dollar project, you do actually get a benefit of it. We should see the end of this. Well, we paid you $300. We've made $10 billion. But tough. That NFTs will change that, and I think that's a great thing. Yeah. What do you think, Hunter?
Yeah, I think it's going to change that in a whole lot of different spaces. Obviously, they have with everything from token tracks to play-by-play, where you're getting artists for secondary sales, all the way down to these art galleries that we're now seeing that are actually now returning some of their entrance tickets and the revenue from that into the NFT holders themselves, and the sort of massive decentralization of ownership of art in general. And we're now seeing that even well beyond just the traditional art that we see with NFTs, down to what we were talking about earlier with car titles, home deeds, and where you now have these rental services almost of sort of like Airbnbs or renting your car for a day, and they're now beginning to use NFTs exactly for that. So that secondary market, I think, is going to be one of the biggest driving factors in continued adoption from different sectors. So I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, sure. We're running a bit. Sorry to interrupt. We're running a bit low time. I just really wanted to give the audience the opportunity to ask any questions. So if anyone would like to ask our esteemed panel something, it'd be great to hear. And someone at the back.
On the earlier topic of centralization and adoption through ease of use, you see countries now developing their own digital currencies. How do you think these CBDCs will affect the space, and what are your thoughts on them?
Everyone's looking at me. That's a really, really good point. The CBDCs, and for those who don't know CBDC, which good job pronouncing that. I get it wrong every time. I always put it in the wrong order, like ACDC. centralized bank digital currency. It's the concept of a lot of these governmental agencies and states moving towards their own sort of cryptocurrency for greater tracking and greater tax benefits, or not. We don't get the benefit in all reality. But that's a really good question, and I think it may actually, there may be some good that comes of it in terms of like that may really help solidify this regulation and compliance and how to move forward through and be in compliance very easily. And I think it also could provide a more universal sort of instrument in which we interact with these NFTs, which could be very beneficial. Now, I could go on for hours about my fears around CBDCs, but I'll leave it at that and see if anyone else has any.
When it comes to sort of centralized currencies and governments actually bring them in, I agree with you on the regulation. I think it will massively help. I also hope that we use it as a chance to actually do a change and bring in a universal basic income for everybody. So we could actually bring that in. We could then everybody would actually be able to we could raise the standards of living, and we could actually, because of the reduced costs of actually having a digital currency, we could actually make that work. Obviously, the other thing is we're going to have to be very careful about the blockchain that we picked, because obviously it's going to become the biggest target known to mankind. Because once a government's rolling out a digital dollar or a British digital pound, as I think we're looking at in Britain, you're obviously going to raise the stakes for hacking it. Because let's be frank about it, it's also got a huge amount of money on it. But those are, I guess, that's probably my current thought process. What do you think, Yuri?
It's a hard question. I'm not an expert in this, but my thinking is there's no way, solely the fact you've mentioned, like the volumes that would kind of take place right now, there's no way this could be anywhere near decentralized. But I think it's a good, I actually welcome it. I think it's a good step forward towards trying to regulate the space, having governments getting into this space, getting involved. I just don't see how that would run on Polygon, let alone Ethereum, or any of these decentralized mechanisms we know today. Maybe there is some technology out there that we're not aware of, but it's really hard for this to be decentralized to any extent.
I don't think they'll let us be the validators.
No, I don't think so. Also, your Skittles are going to get very expensive on Ethereum.
Yeah, I think that's a nice point to wrap up on. I'd like to thank our panel and our audience. Yeah, I've really enjoyed the discussion. Thank you.